My name is Aaron Smith, and this is my little sidekick named Rainbow. And we are here to talk about Muhammad Ali. No, not that one. No, Susie. There you go, that's the right one.
Grandma, tell us a story. Okay, kids. Once upon a time, there was a sea called the Mediterranean Sea. These British European dudes set up a blockade to try and keep Napoleon of the French from getting across into Egypt. Napoleon somehow slipped past the blockade but ran into a slave army called the Mamluks.
They were obviously not impressed because he simply wiped them out. So for a quick minute, Napoleon had control and invaded Egypt successfully. But the British, they actually came and caught him and they sank his ships. So he was forced to retreat back to Paris. The Muslims at the time were under Ottoman rule in Egypt, and they were very behind in military because they still had medieval armor, and that didn't really compare very good to France and Napoleon because they had awesome firepower. These invasions caused such great damage to Egypt. Everyone went crazy, there was chaos everywhere, and it was just a weak state. After a while, a man named Muhammad Ali asked to govern and rule Egypt. #turban. At the same time, Islamic thinkers were wondering the best way to stop their rapid decline and to shoot. And this is how Muhammad Ali became known as the founder of modern-day Egypt. He combined both Western culture and preserved old traditional culture. Egypt became one of the most rapidly developed countries outside of Europe. His reign became a period of rapid reform and modernization. Military was a big deal to Muhammad, and
it was in his blood.
The French also brought over cotton, which made Muhammad go crazy. Cotton helped finance their economy. Muhammad took acres of land from religious institutes and feudal farms in order to create his own private plantation. He had his own cotton monopoly. There was cotton everywhere. He took everybody's land and made them all plant the same crop, cotton. He would sell this cotton during harvesting time to the British because they had a large interest. And so this obviously didn't make the peasants very happy because they would have to stop growing their traditional crops. So big picture is, he had good intentions, but he didn't make the peasants happy. You know how the peasants always, they're low class, but overall they actually have, top authority because they revolt and then they're like, ah! And then they, make their place weak. And so they started revolting and everything because he wasn't treating them right. So due to the French invasions, Muhammad was able to step his way in and modernize Egypt, and maybe the people weren't happy, but Egypt was up there. So that was awesome. Hi, well, time to say goodbye. I'm Aaron, this is Rainbow, and you are awesome. And he wiped them out.
1848, Muhammad Ali dies, and he has like 6 successors, and we're going to talk about 4 of them. First being Ibrahim, Abbas I, Syed, and Ismail. Ibrahim, he didn't expand much on the modernization, but he will help from European influence. He helped suppress the Ottoman army and had many crushing defeats against them. Abbas I didn't do anything concerning the military, and he reversed many of Muhammad's modernization. Later on, Syed takes over and he tries to expand on modernization with little attempts at building schools and other institutions. Later on, Ismail takes that step with these advancements in modernization came a price. Ismail found himself having a lot of debt and having no.
Go.
With all the modernizations taking place, he found himself in a lot of debt and needed money to help stave off creditors. He came up with the idea of offering to sell some shares of the Suez Canal Company. The British saw this as their opportunity to seize control in Egypt and the Suez Canal. They bought over 40% of the shares and were the single largest shareholder. This took out the French and made British the largest influence in there. And of this move, the British were able to be the major influence and kick out the French. Ismail found that the money he raised wasn't enough to keep his country stable, and eventually his country was in economic downturn again. The British and France. Can I keep going?
Yeah.
The British and French saw this as a reason to help establish a stewardship of finances in the area and sent experts to the business to help run their stores. Ismail wasn't willing to allow this loss of control happen to him, and as a result, he was replaced by his son. The Egyptians also were not happy with this control. Keep going.
Go.
Egyptians were also not happy with his loss of power, and signs of revolt started to happen. A man named Arabi Pasha started a revolt within the Egyptian army and convinced some of his fellow officers to help rise up against the British government. And as a result, the British government responded by bombing the city of Alexandria for one day, and then they soon found out that they were the real control of Egypt and not the Egyptians. The international status of British The international status of British control of Egypt remains uncertain for the next 20 years. National status of British control of Egypt remain uncertain for the next 20 years until eventually Britain and France decided that British control should be paramount in Egypt. Educated Egyptians were less convinced of the benefits of European control, and as a result, educated Egyptians were less convinced of the benefits of European control, and they saw the best jobs going into European hands, and as a result, a sense of nationalism was rising up in their minds. Cromer's new education policy was governed by the objective of bringing financial stability and political stability back to Egypt. As a result, he revamped the education by adding a new requirement that by limiting access to schools by raising up the fees and allowing only the rich and cancel. His answer was to create a two-tiered education system in which basic literacy and mathematics were aimed at the small and the math. His answer was to create a two-tiered education system in the first tier, it will be basic literacy and mathematics aimed at the masses in the small classes. While there will be a small bunch in which advanced subjects such as there will be in the second tier, there will be a small group of people, mainly the elite, who will learn advanced subjects such as politics and governing. These people will come help to be administrators for Britain and help control Egypt. Slowly began to make an economic economy. Egypt under the British slowly began to make an economic recovery. Lord Cromer, the British agent in Egypt and economist, whose words were powerful. Lord Cromer, the British agent in Egypt, became the butcher ruler for 24 years. Lord Cromer embarked on a tough campaign to cut administrative spending, and eventually, after initial years of continuing financial problems, his efforts were rewarded with a budget surplus from 1889 onwards after balancing the books and clearing the old debts. Industry and the education for the people were not his priority, and instead he spent the small surplus on agriculture and railroads. All the administrative officials in Egypt were all British, and likewise, all powers Administrative, administrative officials were all British in Egypt, and likewise, administrative officials in Egypt were all British and all had the same goal. After Cromwell's leaving, more chants and trains sprung up in Cairo and under Sir Eldon Gorse. Lord Cromer embarked on a tough campaign to cut administrative spending, and eventually he was awarded a budget surplus in 1889. Industry and education for the people were not his main priority, and instead he spent the money on agriculture and building railroads. The British were a main influence and had major control in Egypt until leading up to the events leading up to World War I.
So while the cat was away dodging bullets, the mice decided to protest. Soon, many Egyptians found themselves starving and being forced to do labor, without the many animals that they used to do labor because the soldiers took those away too. So thanks to the soldiers, the anti-colonial and the nationalist movements spread throughout Egypt, and they didn't just include the elite, now included all people, even the peasants. Britain!
No, Britain! No, Britain! Dora, 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 the end!
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kam. I'm your reporter from the Egyptian New Age. Today, I'm going to present about Egyptian independence during the 1919 to 1950. My friend Susie back there is going to help me in this presentation.
Good evening. My name is Susie. I'm a reporter from the Egyptian New Age.
Egypt became a British protectorate on December 1914. During the World War I, agitation toward the British increased as all sake of the population united in their discounted. British rule caused Egypt's involvement in the war to increase about 1.5 million Egyptians were conscripted in the labor crop, and much of the country infrastructure was sake of the army contributing to the dissatisfaction.
There is a really smart guy in Egypt named Saad Zahil. A former education minister founded the delegation party, the Egyptian delegation party, during the World War I. Their immediate goal was the end of the protectorate. The Egyptians, the delegation group, was protesting for their country independence. They are trying to prove that they have their own language and their own written language, and they are one nation. They are not trying to be a colonized under someone else. They are trying to protesting, and they are trying to request for the independence. But the British wasn't paying attention to why they are protesting. The students and the other citizens were trying to involve in the protesting. The protesting became huge. During that time, Zahil tried to write a letter to the Mr. Wilsons to help them to get the independence of Egypt. But President didn't pay attention to them. They have no choice. All of the country around the world are really in the trouble, and British is one of them too. The British were trying not to give the independence to Egypt, but they have no choice. Students and the other citizens were trying to involve in the protesting. The protesting became huge. During that time, Zahil tried to write a letter to the Mr. Wilsons to help them to get the independence of Egypt. But President didn't pay attention to them that much because the war is going on around the world. By the end of the war, they have no choice. All of the country around the world are really in the trouble, and British is one of them too. The British were trying not to give the independence to Egypt, but they have no choice because even though the war was over, the Egyptian got a relationship between the Middle East, Ottoman Empire, through the economic, social, and religions and politic. But by the worst, they are trying to connect still with a little bit of economic, but they are free from the West through the politic. Egyptian independence was pretty hard to get it, and they are never tried to giving up for what they were doing, and in the end they finally got the independence for the Egyptian on 1922.